dears, and welcome back to my corner of the internet. I'm Shannon, and today I have another book talk video to share with you guys, and today we're talking about The Lonely Hearts Hotel by Heather O'Neill. Heather O'Neill is a Canadian writer who's gotten lots of praise and accolades and won awards and been nominated for awards. I read my first book by her, I think around 2006, 2007, and it was called Lullabies for Little Criminals, and it was a fantastic book. It was dark, and so when my good friend Krista told me about this book, she had read it, she absolutely loved it. Then one night I was at her place and she gave it to me to read. Even before I started the book, I kind of knew what Heather O'Neill's literary vibe is, so I was ready for it to go dark, and it goes dark. So what I want to do before I get into talking about it and before I recommend it to you is I want to let you know that this book is not for everyone. It deals with a lot of really heavy subjects, and there's subjects that are heavy in the sort of way that if something similar has happened to you, it might be too much for you to read. It deals with sexual abuse, it deals with abuse in general, there's drug use, there's just all the darkness you can think of, it's in this book. That being said, it's a really good book. Heather O'Neill, she writes like a poet. Her prose is almost poetry. It's just beautiful. And she's the kind of writer that when you read her work and you close the book, you're just like, I wish I had written that. Because that's just how it is. So let's talk about this book. The book features Pierrot and Rose. They are when we meet them, they're two very young children who are in an orphanage in Montreal in the 1920s. When the book begins, it's actually 1914, and they're around the same age. They've both been abandoned at an orphanage after having come into this world under very grim circumstances, and they're just left at this orphanage. As they grow up and start to come into their personalities a bit more, we begin to see the way that children are treated at these orphanages at this time, and as you can imagine, it's pretty grim. Pierrot is very entertaining. He's got a big heart. He's very sensitive. He cares about himself, but he also cares very much about the other children in the orphanage. And that's something that comes into play later on, guilt about doing well versus everyone doing well, So Pierrot, he loves to entertain. He loves to just be around people and interact with them and share experiences with them. Then you have Rose. Rose is sort of described as having black hair and beautiful eyes. She's described as not being pretty, but beautiful. At first glance, she's nothing to write home about, but as you get to know her and her essence comes out, she's beautiful, and people are very drawn to her. That'll come into play later as well. She's very imaginative. She has an imaginary friend who she likes to bring out in character to entertain people. He's a big sort of bear. I always picture him as like a circus bear, wearing a little hat and just being larger than life. Even though the boys and girls at the orphanage are kept apart as much as possible, they still have some interactions, and they still get to know each other. Before too long, there's a new nun at the orphanage, and she begins to become weirdly obsessed with Pierrot. She begins waking him up in the middle of the night and bringing him into the bathroom and having very inappropriate exchanges with him. And he's feeling really weird about it. On the one hand, he knows that he doesn't want this to be happening because he's just a little boy. He's like 11 at this point. And then on the other hand, his body's reacting in a positive way just because. So to him, that's creating a lot of guilt and conflict and grief in his life. Then this nun, Sister Eloise is her name, she begins to notice Piero and Rose's very close friendship. And it's driving her nuts because in her mind, she's gotten it so that she thinks she's in love with this child, Piero. And so she begins to treat Rose really badly, like beating her, punishing her for things that aren't punishable offenses. And for whatever reason, Sister Eloise has kind of gotten a full reign over all the other nuns, and they kind of just let her do whatever. Also around this time, once they're around, the 11, 12, 13-year-old age, Rose and Piero start doing a sort of act together, singing and dancing, and he's playing the piano. He's a very gifted pianist. And Rose is singing and dancing, and she's just very much the entertainer. And the two of them, the sisters start sort of sending them out into people's homes to do performances, and it's a way for them to make money and sort of contribute to the orphanage. The sisters really take advantage of that. A little bit more time passes, and Sister Eloise's feelings for Piero are growing and growing and continuing to get really weird and intense. And eventually he sort of tries to manipulate her so that she'll leave him alone. And what he does is he tells her, I feel like we shouldn't do this anymore. We should wait until I'm older and we're married. And sort of even though clearly, she's a nun, but she's clearly a very hypocritical nun, to say the least. Like, she's just very sick, very awful. And, but still there's that part of her that's like, oh, yes, you're right. That would be beautiful. Such a great idea. And then after that, she overhears Piero talking to Rose in an intimate sort of way, and that just sets her off. After Rose walks away, Sister Eloise just grabs her and beats her nearly to death. Beats her to the point that she's she's unconscious for a while, and then in the orphanage's hospital for a long time. During this period of time, an older gentleman, I believe his name is Mr. Irving, he comes in and he is looking for kind of a companion. He's old and he needs, someone to take care of him a bit. And he's looking for, someone to dine with him, someone to take care of him, someone to help him get ready in the mornings and get ready for bed at night. And he meets Piero, and he's just taken with him, and so he adopts him. While this process is happening, Rose is still in the infirmary. Piero's getting a little panicked because he can't say goodbye to her, so he leaves a note, which of course Sister Eloise throws in the garbage. And then while he's gone, he writes to her like every day, every other day, every week, and Sister Eloise, of course, intercepts those as well and just throws them in the garbage. So now we have Piero on the outside, who thinks that Rose is mad at him for not saying goodbye, and for the things that he had said to her before Sister Eloise got so mad and took it out on Rose. And then back on the inside, you have Rose, who thinks that Piero is mad at her because he didn't even say goodbye, and that she should have been more enthusiastic when Piero reached out to her, when in reality they're both still crazy about each other. They're just now separated. After a while, Rose gets hired as a governess for a family with 2 children, and these children are just kind of chaotic. But Rose works well with them because Rose is also kind of chaotic. So the mom's happy because they're out of her hair. The kids are happy because they have someone who's fun and who they can play with and whatnot. And Rose just kind of sets up her life there. And meanwhile, the father of that family, at first he's very wary of Rose and tries to stay away from her at all costs. But eventually he falls in love with her, like intensely in love with her. And they begin having an affair, and Rose is constantly talking about this boy from the orphanage, Piero, and this is annoying this man. His name is McMahon. And it's annoying him, and in his mind he's always like, okay, she's got these memories of this child that she grew up with, but he's thinking she's just kind of romanticizing it, you know, as we sometimes do when we look back on our childhoods. So he's like, if she ever met him now, she wouldn't feel the same way. So the wife, who doesn't know of the affair, she tells the husband at one point, she says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go and try to find that boy for her. You know, she misses him so much, talks about him all the time. I'm going to try to find him. So at this point, even though McMahon doesn't think that the feelings will still be there if Rose were to meet him in the present day, he's not taking any chances. And he sort of whisks her away from the house, doesn't tell anyone, puts her in a hotel that he owns because he's this big time businessman. A lot of his business is illegal, like he deals with prostitutes and drugs and all kinds of things, but to cover that, he also owns a bunch of buildings and properties and things of that nature. So he puts her up in one of the hotels. Meanwhile, his family is like, where'd she go? The wife is really upset because she's lost a good governess. And, you know, she's like, I liked her. I don't know why she would do this to us. Then meanwhile with Piero in the mansion with Mr. Irving, I don't know if I mentioned, but he's very, very wealthy. And Piero's enjoying this very extravagant sort of dandy lifestyle. He's got this beautiful new suit that he absolutely loves. He's got money and luxury, and he's just loving it. And Mr. Irving has some children who just have really distanced themselves from him. But Piero's just there for him, and Piero loves him, and, you know, like a father or a grandfather. And he doesn't mind. Like, he enjoys caring for him and dedicating his life to that. But then, of course, as time goes by, Mr. Irving, who was old from the get-go, he passes away. And before he had died, he told Piero, like, I've amended my will, and told him where it is. And he's like, I'd like to leave you a little something so that you're not just out on the street when I die. And so when Piero brings that paper to one of Mr. Irving's sons, the son just throws it in the fire. So that's why it's really important to actually amend your will with your lawyer, not just depend on a piece of paper. Anyway, so a big portion of the book is just dedicated to the two of them living their lives, trying to find each other in roundabout sorts of ways to look for her. And by the time he does, she's already gone to live with the family. And Sister Eloise tells him, oh, Rose, yeah, no, she got married, she's got kids. Don't even bother looking for her. She does not want to see you. She's so mad, all this stuff. And he takes that to heart and believes her, even though, of course, as we know, it's not true. And then as the story's weaving and unfolding, there are so many near encounters. Like, there'd be so many instances where, like, he would go somewhere and leave, and then she'd go there, or they both knew the same person, but they didn't know that they both did. Or her friend would suggest they go somewhere, and we knew as the reader that he works there, he's a pianist there, but then Rose is like, I don't feel like going there tonight. And so there's all these near misses, and then you kind of, for a bit, you're thinking, is it gonna happen? Are they gonna find each other? But they do. After a lot of things have happened to both of them. Like for Piero, it's drugs, a lot of drugs, and a lot of sadness, and a lot of struggle. For Rose, it's, you know, falling into really bad relationships, like that one with McMahon. He becomes obsessed with her, and to the point where it gets really, really dark. And but finally they find each other. And the darkness doesn't end there. I don't, like, for me to tell you the entire story, it would take far too long. But I would recommend it if you are not too upset by, like I said, there's sexual abuse and just all kinds of abuse in general. So if you can read about those things, then I would definitely recommend this. I would also recommend Heather's other book, Lullabies for Little Criminals. So good. I'd actually love to reread that because, like I said, it's been over 10-12 years since I've read it, and I remember being really affected by it. And I love that title, Lullabies for Little Criminals. I don't know, I loved it. So I'll give some spoilers here now for anyone who wants to know what happens but isn't going to read the book. So once they finally get together, they start planning. First of all, they get married, and that's lovely. And they're together for the first time, and it's just beautiful. When Piero had become very serious about finding her, he got off the drugs, and he cleaned himself up because he didn't want to be a mess for her. And they start planning this show that they're going to do. That they had planned when they were young, and it was called like the Icicle Extravaganza. So she starts auditioning and then hiring a bunch of clowns and all kinds of things to put on this big, beautiful show. And she starts looking for a venue, and she finds one just not too far away over in New York City. So McMahon has sort of tracked them down, and if you recall, he's obsessed. There's one line, let me see if I can find it. He loved Rose so much he needed her dead. It was a man's right to kill the woman he loved. So that gives you an idea of the headspace McMahon is in. Like, he loves her so much, and he doesn't give a crap. He wants her dead, because if she won't be with him, she's not going to be with anybody. So she tries to make a deal with him, and he makes it seem like they're making a deal, and that's if when she's bringing down all of her props and things for her show from Montreal to New York, he's going to put drugs inside one of the props. It's a big moon, and he figures, that way no one's going to like tear apart your props to look for drugs. So Rose is like, okay, whatever, I just want to be left alone. Piero has a really bad feeling about this, as he should, and the props get taken and the drugs get delivered, but McMahon has no intention of letting her go. What ends up happening instead, though, is instead of McMahon succeeding in killing her, he underestimates Rose and how smart she is and how far she's come, and he fails in killing her. And instead of McMahon succeeding in killing Rose, Rose kills him. At that point, Pierre's like, okay, cool, we're free. He wants to stay in New York City and start over. Rose wants to go back to Montreal and sort of take over the empire that McMahon had built, but Piero doesn't want that. He doesn't want that life. He doesn't want that danger. He wants to just be with Rose and be safe. So she goes back and he stays. And he falls back into the drugs, and he ends up dying. And Rose hears about it, and she's sad, but she's not the same young girl that she was. She mourns for him, but it's kind of like life goes on sort of thing. At one point, Sister Eloise appears in her office, and she wants to apologize for the torment that she put Rose and Piero through. Piero especially. Piero was ruined by this woman. His innocence was taken. His ability to live as a normal, functioning person was taken from him by this woman. And she's apologizing, and Rose is, to her face, to Eloise's face, she's saying, thanks for the apology. It's in the past. But on the very last page, at the very last moment, Rose sends someone out one of her guys, because now of course she's running this empire, and she sends a guy out, and a guy puts a bullet in the back of Sister Eloise's head as a sort of way to stop her from ever hurting another child again. So there you go. That's kind of the spoiler end. Like I said, it's not going to be for everyone. It's very dark, but it's beautiful. The character development is amazing. It's so good. Heather O'Neill is just spectacular at that. And if you love well-written fiction, I think you'll love it. So if you have read this, let me know if you did. Of course, in the telling of this story, I've left out a lot of parts, like I said, because there's just too much to put in. So even if you watch the whole video, you could still read the book and get a lot out of it. But yeah. Love Heather O'Neill. I love when we get to talk about really fantastic Canadian authors, and she is definitely one of them. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a fantastic weekend, and I will see you on Monday. Bye guys.